Most cars get safer by accident. A crumple zone here, an airbag bolted on there, chasing regulations after the fact. This car got safer on purpose, because the people who built it used to design airplanes, and airplanes don't get a second attempt at a crash. The Saab 900 wasn't quirky for the sake of being quirky. It was a preview of where the entire automotive industry would end up 30 years later, built by aircraft engineers who looked at the car business and decided everybody else was doing it wrong. Saab started out building military aircraft in Sweden, and by 1947 the company decided it wanted a piece of the car market too. Nobody asked them to. They just figured the people building cars at the time weren't building them very well. Their first attempt, the 92, looked like nothing else on the roads of post-war Europe. The body came off the line as a single stamped shell instead of separate panels welded together, the same way you'd build an airframe, not a sedan. Power came from a two-cylinder two-stroke, later a three-cylinder version, and eventually a four-cylinder engine that Saab essentially built by taking a Triumph F8 and cutting it in half. That basic car, under a few different names, stayed on sale for more than 3 decades with only incremental updates. It took Saab 20 years to build a genuinely new platform. The 99 arrived in 1967 as only the second original design the company had ever produced, and it became the template for everything Saab made for the next generation. What set the 99 apart wasn't styling. It was how the engineers thought about a crash before it happened. Instead of hoping the sheet metal would hold up, they borrowed a concept straight from aircraft design. Structural paths engineered to carry impact force away from the cabin in a predictable direction rather than letting it go wherever physics decided. A solid steel member ran from the windshield pillar down into the floor structure, specifically to keep the roof from collapsing in a rollover, and Saab proved it by literally dropping finished cars from a height and watching them survive with minimal damage. This wasn't a press stunt, it was routine testing. That obsession with rigidity paid off in ways that had nothing to do with crash ratings too. The whole car felt tighter. Doors closed with a dense, solid sound instead of the hollow clank you got from most economy cars of the era. And because the body didn't flex under load, the suspension could actually be tuned properly instead of compensating for a chassis that moved around underneath it. From there, the list of firsts just kept growing. Saab put reinforcing beams inside the doors years before anyone else thought to protect occupants from a side impact that way. They gave headlights their own tiny wiper blades, because a Swedish winter throws enough slush at a windshield that your headlights disappear under it too. The doors were shaped to hang slightly past the door sill, so getting in and out didn't leave a streak of road salt down your pant leg. Heated seats showed up here before almost anywhere else, because cold leather in a Nordic winter is genuinely miserable. Cabin air filtration arrived in the 1960s, decades before it became standard equipment. Even the windshield's curvature wasn't arbitrary. It was shaped to buy the driver extra clearance in a crash while also cutting drag and improving sightlines. 3 problems solved with 1 piece of glass. Then there's that distinctive dip at the rear of the roofline, the detail that makes a Saab recognizable from 2 blocks away. People assume it's a styling choice. It's not. Engineers spent real time in a wind tunnel studying how air separated off the back of the car, trying to tame turbulence that most manufacturers in the 60s weren't even measuring. Saab claimed the resulting shape matched the drag figures of the Citroën DS, a car regarded as one of the most aerodynamically advanced designs on the planet at the time. Nobody had told these engineers that wind tunnel testing a family hatchback was overkill, so they just did it anyway. The people who bought these things told their own story. A 1972 survey of university faculty found something close to comical. Nixon crushed McGovern that year in one of the most lopsided elections in American history, McGovern managing barely 37.5% of the popular vote nationally. Among professors who drove a Saab, he took 98%. The only demographic more one-sided than Saab. Owners was people who didn't drive at all. A Swedish hatchback had somehow become shorthand for a certain kind of person without Saab ever intending it that way. Where the company really got ahead of everyone, though, was turbocharging. And this is the part enthusiasts still debate. In 1978, Saab strapped a turbo onto the 99. They weren't first to market with the idea. Porsche's 930 had already proven forced induction could work on the road. But the 930 was built purely to chase horsepower numbers, a car with flared arches and a spoiler you could land a plane on, designed to feel dramatic. Saab's approach was the opposite. They didn't want a bigger, scarier engine. They wanted to keep a modest 4-cylinder efficient during normal driving and let it borrow extra power only when the driver actually asked for it. That's not a performance philosophy, it's an efficiency philosophy wearing a performance costume. and it's precisely how almost every turbocharged engine sold today is designed. Your average crossover's small turbo 4 exists because Saab worked out this formula more than 4 decades ago. The turbocharged 99 barely got a full production run before the 900 replaced it in 1978, and the 900 is where all of this came together properly. Everything behind the driver, the glass, the doors, the hatch, carried over unchanged from the 99. The front end grew to satisfy new American crash standards, adding a couple of inches to the wheelbase and several more up front. And that rollover structure bent into a slight Z-shape to accommodate the change, but the underlying idea never went anywhere. The engine layout in the 900 deserves its own explanation, because on paper it barely makes sense. It's a front-wheel drive car, nothing unusual there, but the engine sits lengthwise like it belongs in a rear-drive chassis, mounted almost entirely forward of the front axle, flipped backward, and tilted over at 45 degrees. That angle traces back to the 99's original engine being half of a V8, and cutting a 90-degree V8 down the middle naturally gives you a 45-degree four-cylinder. Power reaches the gearbox through a timing chain rather than a conventional shaft connection. One benefit of this odd arrangement was easy clutch access, since it wasn't buried behind everything else. The drawback was the exhaust routing, which exits near the front of the head, travels forward past the headlight, loops through the turbocharger, doubles back, and passes within a hair of the battery, close enough that Saab put a heat warning sticker right next to it. Owners who kept these cars running long-term learned to respect that engine bay. But the real engineering achievement sat in how Saab managed the boost itself. They built a system called automatic performance control, one of the first setups anywhere designed to detect engine knock in real time and pull back turbo pressure automatically before damage occurred. Most turbocharged engines of that decade avoided knock the blunt way by running compression ratios low enough that boost couldn't cause problems. Porsche's 911 Turbo sat around 6.5 to 1. Saab's later 900 Turbo ran as high as 9 to 1, a compression ratio that would have destroyed a lesser turbo engine without electronic intervention. The payoff was an engine that stayed efficient under light throttle and still made real power when boost came on, all while letting the car run on whatever fuel quality was available, adjusting output automatically rather than requiring premium. Even the wastegate broke convention. Instead of reading intake manifold pressure the way most systems did, Saab's monitored exhaust pressure, which changed how the power actually felt behind the wheel, smoother and more linear than the abrupt surge typical of turbo cars from that period. Peak boost never got dramatic, somewhere around 8 to 10 pounds per square inch. Early versions of the turbocharged engine made 135 horsepower against 110 from the naturally aspirated model, a modest gap on paper. What mattered was where that power showed up. It arrived low in the rev range and stayed there, which meant the car felt quick in everyday driving rather than only on a dyno sheet. And because compression stayed high, there was none of the flat, laggy feeling that plagued other turbo cars of the era. Inside, the aviation influence kept showing up in smaller ways. Switchgear curved around the driver's seating position with the most frequently used controls placed where your eyes naturally landed. The radio sat high on the dash, a small detail that mattered more than its sounds, since competitors of the era often buried radios down near the driver's knee, forcing you to look away from the road entirely just to change stations. The handbrake acted on the front wheels rather than the rear, which sounds backward until you consider the car carried roughly 60% of its weight over the front axle, meaning the front tires actually held better on an incline. And the ignition switch sat low, between the seats, for reasons that had nothing to do with novelty. Removing the key required shifting into reverse first, which locked the transmission in place without needing a handbrake that could freeze solid in icy weather, and it kept a rigid metal component clear of the space a driver's knee would occupy in a frontal collision. Every one of these choices traces back to the same question aircraft engineers ask by habit. Where does the body go if something goes wrong, and what needs to not be there? What's strange is how long this platform stayed relevant. A design finalized in 1967 was still competing credibly against brand-new rivals 20 years on. Saab posted month-over-month sales growth for 5 consecutive years through the mid-1980s, on a car most of the industry would have considered outdated. That kind of longevity almost never happens. Most designs peak, plateau, then fade as newer competitors arrive. The 900 kept picking up buyers who wanted exactly what it offered and couldn't find it anywhere else. Writing about the 900 Turbo in 1982, journalist David E. Davis compared it to a Mercedes that had gone off the rails for one wild night and never fully recovered. describing it as dependable family car values with an occasional streak of rebellion built in. His summary was that it was practical enough for the school run and quick enough to outrun trouble if the situation called for it. That line captures the car better than any spec sheet could. Sensible engineering hiding a genuinely mischievous streak. The 900 was never a sports car wearing a family car's clothing, and it wasn't a family car with a performance package glued on top. It represented a completely separate set of answers to problems the rest of the industry hadn't seriously questioned yet. Did safety have to come at the expense of comfort? Saab's engineers didn't think so, and built a structure around aircraft principles to prove it. Did more power have to mean worse fuel economy? They didn't think so there either, and pioneered a turbo system built for efficiency first. Did good handling require a stiff, punishing ride? Same answer. Not every solution aged gracefully. That backward-mounted engine with the exhaust running past the battery gave more than a few mechanics headaches over the years, but the thinking behind it held up. Saab stopped building the 900 in 1993, and the company itself struggled on for almost 2 more decades before finally shutting down in 2012, a casualty of ownership changes and the fallout from the 2008 financial crisis. But none of the engineering ideas disappeared with the badge. Every small turbocharged engine built today that still delivers strong low-end torque owes something to what Saab worked out first. Every car with reinforced door beams is running a concept Saab introduced. The heated seat, the cabin air filter, a dashboard laid out around the driver instead of the assembly line, all of it can be traced back to a Swedish aircraft company that refused to accept the industry's assumptions. And here's the good news. These cars are still out there and still affordable. Saab built plenty of them. Many are still on the road decades later. And while values have started climbing as more people rediscover what made the platform special, it hasn't priced anyone out yet. If you want to understand what genuinely forward-thinking engineering felt like from behind the wheel in the 1980s, a 900 Turbo will still show you. Just go in with your eyes open. The backward engine, the exhaust routed a whisper away from the battery, the ignition tucked down by your knee. This was a car for people who understood that doing things the unconventional way is sometimes simply the correct way, wearing a strange costume.